And welcome to the Nonsensus. I am here with Myc O Phile of the Michigan Initiative for Community Healing, which is an acronym that I think deserves applause. Mish, as in again.
As in again.
As in Michigan.
Yes.
Where we both hail from, correct?
Yes.
And we do so love it so.
I love the mitten.
I do as well. The glove. I do so love.
The glove loves us.
Yes, I do believe so. And you have been showing much love for the glove much love for the glove in the mitten in Michigan by tell us about some of the work that you've done.
I'm a drug policy activist, drug user. But we been working in drug policy for about 20 years. Started the first time before we even had medical, working on an initiative, trying to collect some signatures, didn't go anywhere. Then again in 2007, or 2008, when we passed medical, that just kept progressing. When I ended up in college, really taking it serious and realizing drug policy could be a profession.
Medical cannabis, you're saying?
Yeah.
Which now, that's like totally league, huh?
That's like 15 years ago.
Well, not totally illegal 15 years ago.
Well, I mean, it would have been 14 years ago that it went into action in Michigan.
What is an action? What do you mean by that?
April 10th, 2009 was the days of the very first medical cards being issued.
But since recreational, that's not bad. And this is the thing that I find.
Actually, yeah, medical is still very valid. As somebody who sits on felony probation currently, the only reason I'm able to partake is because I have a medical need. So as a medical patient, I'm allowed to consume my medicine on probation. However, I would not be able to smoke for recreation.
How long ago was it before recreation? And I just wanted to point out that it's like unnoticeable to me. And I always thought that it would be this huge, thing that would change. And it's just, and really, and a lot of people say this, like, oh, that's just, one year it wasn't. And now it's been what? Has it been 2 years? I don't even know.
We legalized cannabis in Michigan in 2018.
So
5 years.
Nearly 5 years.
Oh yeah, 4.5 years, just over 4 years.
And now it is like, if there's two things on billboards, Shen Yun and cannabis. Really?
Well, we don't have Shen Yun on this side of the state near as much, but yes, you're right. I drive on that side of the state a lot.
Well, it's coming soon.
It's coming soon.
So yeah, there's the thing. Yeah, I had this thought that that I was curious if with recreational legalization of cannabis, will more weed be smoked? Will people who otherwise wouldn't gravitate towards it? Will I myself see an increase in my cannabis use? And I gotta say, it's like, it's just been not that big of a deal to the people that I know. And it hasn't had any effect on their like usage or anything like that. It's just, you don't have to worry about being kidnapped by government officials for smoking a plant or having it or selling it.
I think that's true. For anybody that was actively using cannabis already, their circles already used cannabis. So we don't really see a change in patterns there, just better quality product being consumed, maybe even a little bit more responsible use because we're able to talk about it with each other. I noticed that in myself. But at the exact same time, I do think overall we've seen an increase in usage amongst like the amount of population that's using, but it is an informed population versus what it was before where, you didn't know your source. You couldn't find anything about it. But then we get into the problem right now of like remediated cannabis. Remediated cannabis, you don't have to actually label it as remediated once you've remediated it. So like if it doesn't pass the testing standards for the state because it has like mold, Well, then it goes back to that person that like brought it for the testing, and they can remediate that mold and then submit it for testing again. And if it passes testing standards that second time, you don't have to label that as remediated weed.
Darn. I remember I had a trim job for a bit there and got to see some of the innards of a large scale industrial grow situation. And it is, I gotta say, and there's so many people who say this, like there's, I don't know about every example, but there's been a lot of very bummersome just the way that the rec rollout has happened, and like who's getting the money and stuff like that. It is like as was forecasted by many. And I don't know what the rollout was like in like Oregon, Colorado, but you just hear this and it's like, so what do you think? What is the ideal for, let's say, with mushrooms? Like, what is the ideal way to transition?
So I think that really is a good transition. With cannabis, Michigan had one of the most progressive laws and did one of the best jobs up to that point. So from what Colorado and California already had in place, Michigan did better, but the model keeps improving. And we're learning from past mistakes as we're approaching psilocybin and other entheogens and really towards ending the drug war at large. Because I think when we're looking specifically, let's say psilocybin, mushrooms, there are a lot of local growers. They're very concerned that the same thing's going to happen that happened to them with cannabis growers. Those were the concerns we saw with the cannabis movement, was the local growers were going to get cut out. The people that had been risking their lives and livelihood, families and homes and, everything to provide for the community, a very necessary medicine. And they were largely cut out. The caregiver community in Michigan is really strong, but how do we avoid that with mushrooms is essentially the question. And, I think first and foremost, before we look at a medical model, before we look at a recreational sales legalization model, we need to start with decriminalization. And that's what Mission tends to do. So decriminalization means essentially we make it no longer a crime for an individual to cultivate and consume and maybe share with friends some of their natural substances that come out of Mother Earth. That's a silly fucking concept to me, that man's law can overrule nature. Like, nature's law is for sure the supreme law there.
It's even dumber than that, though, with mushrooms, isn't it? That they're being on like cow pie. The growing wet is not illegal. You can have that because you can't stop it because you have a cow that's going to have, or just like, that there's different places they'll just grow on somebody's property or just a national park. But it's when you pick them and dry them, right?
Yeah.
In states, in places where it's illegal. If you
So
pick them,
Florida,
dry them,
Texas, Louisiana, fresh mushrooms are completely legal because like they just occur naturally everywhere.
Mhm.
Like you pick them out of the field so your cows don't eat them, even though like, well, we won't get into how a cow processes psilocybin or not.
Cows, tripping cows. Like, I know there's tripping goats.
So if we want to talk about tripping cows, I'm actually gonna like delve a little bit more into like mad cow disease and ergotism.
We could bookmark it and be on the thread that we were before.
we should definitely come back there.
That's
at
a
some
bookmark.
point.
Okay. Ergotism?
Ergotism, like the
worship of LSD.
I mean, basically. I mean,
Okay.
for long story short, we're gonna land at the worship of LSD.
It's a good bookmark. You were talking about the model for decriminalization. Decriminalization. So Washington County, Detroit.
Yeah. So first, actually, we did Ann Arbor. So it started with a Michigan Psychedelic Society meeting that local activist Chuck Ream in Ann Arbor, who's been a cannabis activist since the 70s, since like the original Free John St. Clair rally and Hash Bash. And he showed up to a Michigan Psychedelic Society meeting at Friends Meeting House in Ann Arbor, where I was giving a mushroom grow workshop, teaching people how to cultivate their own mushrooms. Well, in the lesson, I taught people how to cultivate, edibles. I explained that all these processes were readily transferable over to providing your own medicine for yourself. And then we provided spores for everybody to go home and do the thing. And kind of that, I don't know if you remember the early 2000s, but like the overgrow.com approach of like, let's just spread the love of genetics and teach this freely and openly to as many people as we can, as fast as we can, and just like overgrow the government. And while that didn't necessarily happen in Ann Arbor has blown up into being a big psychedelic hub. There are very many operating businesses. Well, technically illegal, very gray area in terms of what followed the Ann Arbor Initiative, which me, Chuck Ream, who showed up, and then Julie Barron, who's the president of Michigan Psychedelic Society. Uh, Three of us got together with some for sensible drug policy folks, put together the Ann Arbor piece and ran with it. As soon as we passed it, though, Ellie Savitt, the prosecutor of Washtenaw, made a declaration that he wasn't going to enforce selectively just Ann Arbor, and the rest of the county was going to be different. So he was going to extend that to everywhere else. So he didn't have to have his officers making a choice across which side of the highway they were on.
He's a real chill prosecutor, that
And
guy.
Ellie Savitt's amazing. I mean, he's chill, but he is very passionate about the issues. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to criminal justice and actual justice. Well, he sees the system as something that should be rehabilitative, not something that should be, let's just punish and create that, social system that just catches you up. Let's create something that's actually meaningful and works. And he's a prosecutor that actually believes that and fights for that and charges based on that.
Was he the one who said that after decriminalization was like entirely greenlit for Washington County, that it was like, we have been pretty much like that we haven't been going after people with psychedelics for a while.
Yeah. And I think you're going to find that's true most places. They're not going after most psychedelics. There are a few exceptions in the synthetic realm, MDMA and ketamine, that have seen, a lot of enforcement.
I've heard of people getting quite fucked for MDMA before.
Yeah, and quite frankly, just equally as valuable substances.
Mm-hmm. But mostly extracted. Yeah. The stories that I hear about people getting caught with is just really ends up coming down to the government like getting money.
Oh, yeah, no, the model is extractive for sure. It's not about keeping people safe, for sure. One of the first things I ask people when, usually we get into a conversation about drug war is, I'm like, hey, has the drug war worked? Most people say, well, no, of course it hasn't. Like, prohibition doesn't work. Mm-hmm. I tend to push back and say, I think it's worked exactly the way it intended to. It was meant to be a racist, classist system to keep the powers that be in power and the people at bay, to catch people up in addiction instead of providing the harm reduction and health-based approaches that make sense, by incarcerating them and catching them up in a probationary system and a court system in an endless cycle of no longer having an opportunity for a job or a home because they're now a felon. And now because you can't get employment, it's just an endless cycle of creating poverty. When we're talking about an initiative for community healing, we're not talking about psychedelic drugs. We're not talking about drugs. And yeah, drug policy is at the center of what we're doing. We're talking about dealing with our shit. Mm-hmm. Creating actual healing solutions and like addressing our traumas.
Which psychedelics can be, they're not a panacea, but they can be very, very helpful. Boom, 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 boom. All right. I don't know how long that was muted, but that if a society, if a society fosters lying or like necessitates it by having something that a lot of people do, like drugs, illegal, and have to be hush hush about it and have to be danced around it, you have more lying. And the more lying there is society, the more it just is this corrupting element. And so, like, there's so many things that are obviously good about ending the drug war, but one of those is that just more people being able to be honest about what they do with the free sentient adults.
Let's talk about addiction before we get into harm reduction real quick. Like most people, like they're concerned about addiction and addicts in their community, and that's a very stigmatizing like set of words there. And what I prefer is people with problematic relationships with a drug, because the fact of the matter is we only see the problem because people that aren't having problematic relationships, that fly underneath the radar, people that are good day drinkers but don't have a problem, people that have a couple beers a couple times, but you don't see responsible use because it's subtle, but it's illegal, so you still have to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
Problematic use always shows its face, though. And that's probably 40% or less of all drug use that's actually going on. Somewhere similar to
way less. Might be way less.
I mean, I'm putting it somewhere, I think, similar to what alcohol is. But like when we're talking about problematic use of a substance, if I can't tell my partner or my mom or my sister or my friend or my coworker or anybody close in my circle that should be my support system what I just disappeared for 5 minutes to do, and then I have to like do this whole mask thing and like put in the eye drop, like that sounds like how we start problematic relationships. That sounds like how addiction is formed. We're forcing people into addiction by creating a more dangerous system.
Because the more you lose respect for yourself and trust in yourself to let's say not do this there's something that is very when one is shamed for drug abuse and addiction, the answer tends to be do drugs about it.
And that's where harm reduction comes in, meeting users where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
I give a fuck less what you do. As I introduced myself at the beginning, I am a drug user.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important when we're talking about drug laws, not for us, without us. Mm-hmm. You look in New England, we got the New England Drug Users Union. They've unionized. You look in Vancouver, the union is crazy. Like they bring in your street, whatever you bought on the street, and trade it in for guaranteed good quality. Just trade it at the union.
Wow.
Like, what is okay? We're not there in Michigan, but like, so we got this legislation piece there, but then getting into dance safe and harm reduction, we're looking more broad spectrum at some of these bigger pieces. And in the meantime, until we can get to a ballot initiative that would really more effectively end the drug war in Michigan by decrimming all drugs, hopefully in 2024. We're providing services on the ground at Nonsense nights, at every further frequency event we can make. We're trying to make it to electricity in Pontiac, a pyramid scheme in Grand Rapids. We're at Tangent a lot. Our team is growing rapidly. We'll be at Movement, Big Fam. Like we're trying to be everywhere, but what we're trying to do is, okay, let's meet users where they're at on the street, where use is actually happening. And so wherever that is, we meet them and we're like, here are those safe supplies, regardless of a legality. And at the end of the day, doing harm reduction work in Michigan is quasi-protected. So like the Red Project Harm Reduction Michigan get to hand out Narcan and stuff for free. Our Narcan is also provided by the state. We are a harm reduction nonprofit. We are allowed to give away stuff for free. However, in the state of Michigan, selling test kits is illegal. No, It's never been enforced to my knowledge, but it is technically on the books illegal, and we need to change
How do you
that.
justify that?
And
Is the
like,
thing. How
no,
do you
but
even
yeah, like,
justify that?
okay, like people are gonna use drugs. So a test kit gives you the ability to identify potential red flags within that substance and identify that the substance you think you purchased does in fact exist in the sample. Can't tell you anything about it, something about what it contains. So, and what we say, we're not looking for green lights, we're looking for red flags. So,
It's like fentanyl sort of thing.
well,
Like, that being
I
one.
mean, yeah, that'd be like the least example in my, like, everybody's concerned about fentanyl. I think a lot of what's going on with fentanyl is a lot of fear fed. There is very real concerns about fentanyl, but realistically, fentanyl is largely in the heroin supply and opiate supply, and then a little bit maybe in the cocaine and other things supply, but I think most of that is likely happening to contamination. I mean, you think people, large cartels or even dealers pushing kilos or several kilos of weight of several substances, like, you ever met a dealer that took a Clorox wipe to scale after weighing anything? That scale's touching all sorts of stuff. Yeah, you're going to get cross contamination of fentanyl in your Coke and heroin in your Molly. And like, that's going to happen naturally. Is somebody intentionally putting something as heavy of a downer as fentanyl in MDMA? I don't know. In cocaine, like, what's the practicality? Nobody'd buy that Coke anymore. They want to go listen to house music and all night. Like, or go make laws.
Are you suggesting that there are productive, high-ranking people in society that use cocaine?
I would say there's productive, high-ranking people in society that use heroin, which would be a far more controversial statement. But yes.
Well, there's the because I thought you were saying what I know as the thesis of one Dr. Carl Hart, who I admire very, very much. And you could just look into Dr. Carl Hart if you want to go down that lane. So DanceSafe, what does it do particularly? You got a booth and it's got information.
Oh man. Yeah, we do a lot of things in Michigan. So DanceSafe itself is a nonprofit formed in 1998 to provide harm reduction services in the nightlife community. Michigan is one of the very active chapters in DanceSafe. We are doing several shows a month. And what that looks like for us varies by venue. So at some venues, we just start with basic education, drug education cards on just about every substance, a basic information about what reagent testing looks like, but we don't offer reagents. We don't offer test kits. We do always offer free Narcan. We've never had anybody tell us, no, we can't do that. But that moves all the way over to the other end of the spectrum, where we have some venues, even though it's completely illegal for them, they allow us to openly do drug checking on site. Now, think about that. You're risking your alcohol license, your business, to allow the safety of your people. This could shut you down. That doesn't make sense to me. But that's why they're rebelling. That's why they're pushing back against things like the Rave Act that exists to make that illegal. And so at some of these places like Tangent, where we hit a nice happy middle ground, we have, like you called it, a table of a whole bunch of things. Everything from safe snorting supplies. So that looks like personal spoons that you can buy for a couple dollars, nasal sprayers. Actually, I probably have one on me. I don't, but nasal sprayers that you just keep some saline on.
I know what that looks like.
Yeah, if you snort substances ever, it's good to keep your nasal passages hydrated. If you want to be more responsible about your dosing, it's a great way to get into volumetric dosing and actually be able to control. I'm getting 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams every spray, and like dosing out like you would, if your doctor gave you Adderall or something in a responsible drug using pattern. Doctors aren't all bad. They do teach responsible drug use for the drugs they're allowed to peddle, generally. We won't talk about the pain industry. But then we also have free snorting kits. Those have a business card, a little thing on Hep C that splits into 3 straws that you can roll up, 4 plastic straws, a plastic razor blade, and 2 plastic spoons that you can use. So you and your friends can have a party and everybody have their own identifiable device and nobody has the same thing. So everybody can have a good time safely. Everything you need, chop it up and
you just say that it's for COVID safety, and then it gets the green light, right?
Yeah. From there, we also offer fentanyl test strips. So that is, I mean, if you want to bookmark like a real wormhole, fentanyl testing is definitely one of those. DanceSafe's new fent strips are absolutely amazing. If you've done any other fentanyl testing before these fent strips, you've probably experienced a lot of false negatives. You probably weren't in 4 different dilutions for different substances, and the fact that then you probably need to reagent test to see where it's cocaine or cocaine with levamisole in it, because that's a different dilution. It's complicated. And the reason it's a wormhole is, I mean, for me, I don't want to sound too conspiratorial, but it's ran by a bunch of former cops and DEA in Canada. Like, I don't know. I don't trust them. They got a big contract with the CDC for COVID testing. They're the first group, I guess, to put out a xylazine test just recently, which scares the hell out of me. But their product is known to be ineffective because it produces a lot of false negatives, doesn't come with the instructions on dilutions ever. And at the end of the day, when you look at how they were sourcing, and I may not get this exactly right, but their control, like what we're testing against to make sure that their strips are working, they're testing. You're supposed to source your fentanyl or your whatever from like several different labs that have approved to like make sure you're getting a consistent result against fentanyl, like again. But they're just testing from the same place. And that's like, there are no actual standards, but there's standards. You know what I mean? Like, there's no regulations, but there's standards of practice, and they're just not meeting that. And now, like, they got the CDC thing, and we're getting all these false positives or, false negatives with COVID tests that are probably theirs, and I just don't trust the company. But again, the wormhole goes deep. I barely scratched that.
Yeah, I've heard like a few theories of why for the fentanyl crisis, and one of them was like, a few of them were really dark, really like spooky stuff, which I think when I like, it seems so evil. The drug war, I mean, has been evil, absolutely, in its effects. But there's a lot of things where it seems like once some people like yourself get together and just go up to the levers of change and policy, that it's not as resisted as you would think. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I was going to be talking decrim all drugs 2024, I would have told you we were just beginning the conversation to psychedelics in 24.
Yeah.
We're going to win in 23.
Yeah, it seems inevitable with MDMA, psilocybin. The case is too strong.
It is. And so, also dance safe, though. I don't want to leave that too far. We have Narcan. We have test kits. We've also got
the informational cards. I find those to be just great.
The informational cards and the mushroom stickers are really the 2 big draws. Like the informational card, you're walking down, wherever, and you just see this giant card that says ketamine, and like looks like a K-hole sucking it in, or the
DMT.
I really like to stick the alcohol and nicotine one or tobacco one facing out, because everybody's like, what is this like 1980s like pack of cigarettes, like hard, like, what are they pushing here? And they walk up and you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
turn
It's
the
info. It tells you
turnstile.
how
Yeah.
it has on it, like what it does physiologically, what the no-nos are, what things not to mix it with.
What
And
you expect physically.
yeah.
Yeah. Like how, like what you're going to feel like.
Safety tips,
Yeah.
pragmatic information about this thing.
Dosage.
Yes. Which is the thing with alcohol, is like alcohol, I mean, most people would be dead if they chugged a liter. They sell liters, you know.
I've definitely chugged a liter.
I think.
Is it
Okay? Maybe not most people. Maybe not north of 51%.
No. I'm definitely with you. I've definitely been over the lethal limit when picked up by the EMT. So I shouldn't be alive seveul times.
Well, it's the thing you work up to. Well, congrats.
Maybe.
I found with alcohol, there's definitely havoc every day in every major city. And it's that there's the thing is like most, or not most, but something like close to half of homicides take place on alcohol. There's a lot that alcohol does, but people know that they understand what their limit is, as where with the other substances, there's just no information. You're doing everything in such a sneaky and in your
sneaky and misinformed
back alley.
Yeah, there is no safety protocol. So really, harm reduction is great on the street. Well, there is a drug war, but the ultimate job that we have is, people working on policy is to put ourselves out of a job, win the policy, and take ourselves off the volunteer teams on the street because we're no longer needed. Mm-hmm. By creating the systems that actually are based in harm reduction and public health, by legalizing all drugs after decriminalization. It's important to protect the people first and foremost. And that's why decrim must come before legal. Yeah. But as we look forward towards, the ballot initiative for 2024, you said it earlier, the big corporation, the big capitalist model for mushrooms is coming down the pipeline. So
inevitable.
Our next priority after protecting the people is protecting Michigan, protecting Michigan business, Michigan ownership of business. And so our 2024, we're hoping to be working with several of the community growers that are already working, which were not included in cannabis lawmaking because, they were outlaws. We don't care. Come to the table. We'll meet in private. Like, let's talk about what a good community-based model for you is. And when we're talking about the big corporations that are inevitably coming in, instead of fighting them, let's extend an olive branch. Let's meet them in the middle and say, hey, our community-based business model is doing great with mushrooms and plants and, all these naturally occurring things that anybody can grow pretty low risk, pretty low risk, versus making MDMA or synthesized psilocybin or heroin or whatever.
I hear meth labs explode sometimes.
Yeah, they sure do. So do THC concentrate labs, like butane explosions happen.
Well,
happened to a very good friend of mine. But let's include a research package that invites you into our state as these big pharmacy corporations. Come here and study those drugs openly and freely, and don't have any red tape at the state level with the Controlled Substances Act. You just have to get that DEA license to do the research. So usually a big research company has several layers of red tape. They have the DEA, and then they have the state Controlled Substances Acts that they've got to cut through. We could cut that barrier out, which would bring big groups like Compass and MAPS and people that everybody's like, oh no, we don't want them here. Not here running the industry, but here doing real research, real medical stuff with University of Michigan, Michigan State, Western, Ferris, Grand Valley, Eastern. We could be helping our schools and our students and our people with jobs and new opportunity by allowing them in with an olive branch for research. There is a happy middle ground. Everybody in this game wants to play it's an all or nothing or this or that thing. And I think there is a happy middle ground where everybody can be happy and we can do something that benefits the people of Michigan the most and is equitable, creates a sense of belonging for all, and really starts to get to the roots of what's going on in social justice of the drug war by looking at expungement of the people we're decriminalizing that are, already got charges, amnesty for things that we ultimately legalize. We really need to get to the because if it's still on your record, but it's legal, you still can't get a job.
Mhm.
We can't leave people behind like we did with cannabis. We just had a man get out of prison after 20 some odd years for cannabis in the state of Michigan. Just had this happen like last week. Myc O, the man who is responsible for my ability to smoke cannabis right now on probation, was raided in the fall. He won that case that allowed people on probation to smoke on probation at the state level, took it all the way, fought hard for us, and won. And then, a few years later, his property gets raided where he grows hemp for CBD, and they charged him as all cannabis plants. And he went in for sentencing yesterday. And the recommendation in Michigan, I don't care how much fucking weed you have. The recommendation, life. Life in prison. And the judge said, I can't believe I'm even being asked to rule on a cannabis case in Michigan in 2023. He says, I can't believe I'm being asked to hand down the sentence and I won't. But apparently, this is not about the people of Michigan. And my job is to protect the money interests of our big investors. And he sentenced him to 2 years probation, which is huge. That's huge that a judge would say that. But he's right. It's 2023 and life in prison over cannabis, that was a prosecutorial recommendation. I can't fathom that for cannabis. Yet 10 years ago, that was normal.
We shouldn't be warehousing anybody for anything short of somebody of just being
Direct
dangerous.
harm to others.
Yeah. And I suppose there's something in some things in the realm of theft or other ways, but there need to be a victim. And if it's not violent, it needs to be consistent and there needs to be able to be a case that we're making everybody safer by, because warehousing somebody is so barbaric. And
it's expensive.
Yeah, and I do think that there is a time where there's been several things in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights where it's been many of them are obvious, but cruel and unusual punishment. So in 1880 as opposed to 1980, but soon I think we look back on that, we think warehousing people just like prison, just indefinite captivity for having a thing.
It's modern slavery. You look down in St. Louis, there's prisons there, almost every commissary item that you would get in a county jail around America. You ever been in jail? You heard about a honey bun, right? Well, everybody's honey buns, they're all coming from this prison in St. Louis. And so is all your other commissary foods. They're all packaged down there. And, we see license plate factories. We see all sorts of different things going on that are being run for wages, but wages approved for prisoners, like $1.35 an hour in commissary money, because of course you can't have real money as a prisoner. Heaven forbid we give you the ability to like hop on Amazon and order a fucking book at that new library we just put in. I don't know. I haven't actually been to prison. I just hear it's a little bit better than county.
I mean, I've heard that said in like movies and things. So something to come to landing the ship, because we only got 15 minutes. I did have questions standing out. So yeah, what recently happened? Ferndale has absolutely decriminalized now,
Yeah.
with which at the same level as Detroit and Washington County, which is
And Hazel Park.
Okay, and yeah, Hazel Park was the other one. And so is the mission to do all of Michigan, city by city, county by county, or is there some way for it to be statewide?
So yeah, Mich is two tiered. We have the city movement, Decrim Nature Michigan, and then we have the state movement, Michigan Initiative for Community Healing. We are the same org. Decrim Nature Michigan focuses on this model that we ran in Ann Arbor, Detroit, Hazel Park, and Ferndale, and we're doing it in Jackson. We actually our point in Jackson just gave a copy to the city attorney in Jackson tonight of the Hazel Park and Ann Arbor resolutions. In Flint, they're meeting, it seems like twice a week now, starting to get ready to go to their council members. Here in Grand Rapids, we just set up an appointment today with council member Lisa Knight, and we're going to go talk to her. Down in Buchanan, they're rallying. Ipsy is starting to rally. Madison Heights is starting to rally. And I think what you're going to see is a big swell of city movements, and we're here to support all of it. We have all the materials already prepackaged, ready to update any of the designs and logos to your stuff, or you can just steal what you want of our stuff and make it your own, because like this isn't about ownership or being, a gatekeeper. This is about like providing the things that have worked for everybody to use open source and continue growing.
You're saying if a person who lives in a place that doesn't already have a decriminalized nature, reaching out to get that started and be supported in that.
Yeah, I mean, call it decrim nature, call it what you want, use our materials or don't. We're here to help. Like every city for us is a win for the state. The state is a win for all the city movements. So really that's the goal. At the state level, I think what you're going to see, and I want to be like a little cautious to say too much, but I think what you're going to see is before summer session or summer break for our legislators, you're going to see a bill introduced. And then instead of like getting really heated up in committee, they're going to go on summer break and go dance on their boats and have a great time and do a bunch of cocaine or whatever politicians do. And then they're going to come back all like burn out from the summer, and they're not going to fight near as hard about what's going on. And with the momentum of EntheoFest and Entheogenic Plant Fungi Awareness Month in Ann Arbor and the other cities that have passed over the summer, it's going to be a shoe-in. It's going to pass in September, right about the time that we probably launched the 2024 ballot initiative. But I mean, that's all a theoretical timeline in my mind. But yeah, something like that.
It seems to me that there just needs to be people who are willing to be squeaky wheels and interface with the probably very tedious and annoying aspects of doing legislation.
I actually am just like built to interact with politicians and like do policy work. I love it and I hate it at the same time. I hate being good at it, but it's like so fascinating to me, and like my brain just like clicks with it. So like it's my natural space, and I'm glad to fulfill that role as political director for Mesh. But then at the same time, you know, I try not to be the squeaky wheel. I try and be that shiny new upgrade they've all been looking for. Try and come in like, hey, here's the Model 3. Like, let's go.
Yeah, and it's got such a good case for it because of the success rate for therapy for veterans, particularly, is just like that. You just could make such a great case with that. It's like because the very I mean, you would think that like conservatives, for example, old school conservatives, what used to be the definition of would be very difficult to change some minds about what they just see as drugs, entirely drugs. But with veterans, isn't it like north of 80% curing PTSD?
Yeah, I don't want to like wrongly quote, but something like 80% of PTSD veterans in a study, I believe that was UC Davis, recover or saw significant improvement for their PTSD. But additionally, like 22 veterans commit suicide every single day. If you just say that to any elected official, that hits home. But I think you're drawing to a much bigger point, and that is this is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. And everybody's like, oh, Michigan, the Dems just took over. Now we can get it. I'm like, actually, I think we're going to have a bipartisan introduction and a bipartisan win. In fact, I'm quite confident in that. If you look at who's been championing SSP bills in the past few years, which would be supervised or I'm not even going to try and say what it means, but it's for syringe access, like we were talking about earlier. That's been largely Republicans because, oh no, drug use is moving into my white towns. I won't name any specific towns to call out any legislators because these legislators are now allies for us. When we're talking about the harm reduction and the paraphernalia piece, and then same way veterans are appealing to them, we say, hey, look, not only are we protecting your kid from overdose, because, it's now in your community, but we're also saying, here's psychedelics, which are shown just as effective in like overcoming addictive tendencies. They're like, oh. And then they're like, oh, wait, and I'm getting old and dealing with aging, and this helps people come to grips with death and dying. And it decreases recidivism of formerly incarcerated felons and offenders of crimes. Like, then of course there's always the cognitive liberty angle. I mean, if we're talking about the right, they love their freedom, right? Like cognitive liberty is everything. The ability to like, at least in theory, certainly at the like libertarian end of that right spectrum. So like it's very much a right issue. But when we're talking about community healing, mental health, when we're talking about equity, when we're talking about, community, like now we're starting to sound like a progressive on the left. I really do think this is the issue where we're gonna like really come in from both sides on drug policy for the first time, because we are talking about a full spectrum thing and we're not going after the interests that backed everything with cannabis and every attempt before. We're trying to be genuine this time. And I think larger drug policy organizations are seeing that. And I think that's why you're seeing their push in other states instead of in Michigan. And when they do want to come here, they come to us. They don't go to our legislators.
Well, we've talked about this before. Like the path to decrim and legalization was always going to be, prescriptive. How make the case for how it helps, and like Rick Doblin Maps and company, like as soon as I was seeing the data for particularly veterans, like using the word cure PTSD, you no longer meeting the criteria. So all of that, like that's the case that has to be made to get it to the point of, to actually change laws. But in the future, at some point, we're going to be talking about the capacity for these tools to not just fix what's wrong, but give people a tool, a vehicle to expand their horizons, to have a more just enjoyable life, to have a happier reality, as I say. And I think that's going to be super important with the dawn of AI happening, just because there's going to be a lot of idle hands, and idle hands who are also racked with mental health problems. That can be a real problem. But I see a bunch of people being out of work, but also the whole nature of work, the whole idea of giving value to society, or like that's just going to change a bunch with AI and robotics, and having neurochemical options to not succumb to how that's just gonna be a radical change for a lot of people. The people that have so much of their self-worth and identity in what they do.
I think you're absolutely right. How we deal with the singularity, nobody actually understands for sure. I personally hope like it's kind of a transcension to another dimension. Like I do think psychedelic. No matter what, I think the key to our like success with AI is involved with psychedelics. Like it just makes too much sense to me. I don't have any good scientific evidence to back it. I just I feel it in like everything.
Yeah, I think it was Duncan Trussell said that ketamine particularly seems like some sort of social lubricant with the AI, with the technological horizon. Like,
God, I'm gonna have to try this soon. Like, just K out with ChatGPT 4 and Midjourney.
Well, in VR is like VR by itself. I'm yet to have experience of being on a substance heavily and being in VR, but man, when you take the headset off, that is a fuck-a-doodle doozer of a psychedelic experience, of a psychedelic mind manifests so much just a mind fuck. It is really significant. If you're in one of the like
if you're in any 3D immersive space like that for a long time virtually, and then you take that headset off, like the room is almost spinning still. Like everything depth feels different. Your hands and feet, like how they move, feel wrong. Like you know what I mean? Like, nothing. Like, I got a headset in my room, so like I spend a lot of time playing like poker and just like sitting there at a table, and even just in that space, like going like this and like grabbing my digital vape and whatever the fuck I'm doing at this poker table. Like coming out of that space after like 2 hours, I'm like, whoa, okay, wait, I have legs now. Okay, wait, it's a whole like quick learning process again. You're shocking.
Well, fun is going to be really, really important in the oncoming epoch.
I'm excited for that.
Oh, for sure. There's no way around it, because and I know that there's a lot of talk now, people saying like, oh, AI was supposed to alleviate human drudgery so that humans are able to self-actualize and focus on art and creativity and self-expression and the things that they want to do, and the AI is just doing a bunch of art
and the
stuff.
AI is stealing all their
art. That's just one. I mean, this is going to go in all directions, and there's going to be lots of nooks and crannies of what is going on right now, and it is relieving drudgery, and I do believe it shall. That's a long thing. I avoid predictions and presumptions of the future, but one thing that I see as inevitable that makes me very, very excited about AI, and every conversation becomes AI now, but like, is that it's like, yes, there's going to be people who try to gatekeep, and just like with like cannabis legalization, there's going to be a lot of just really unsightly, uninspiring examples of people capitalizing the shit out of this, but also the kind and conscientious little people that used to not have much power, I think it's gonna be sort of like how the gun was, where it was the great equalizer, right? Of like, there were people who were never going to be as good at combat violence as like just a big barbaric, like just very strong, brawny person. And then this thing comes out and it's like, now we're equals. And with AI, I think you're going to see there's people who have really, really good intentions and on a really good missions, like yourself and Mish. And now suddenly they can wield a lot of CPU. They can do a lot in the world.
I sure freaking hope so. So like, it's funny, my day job, I had this campaign I had to put together, and like 20 other projects going on. So I took the AI, typed a few things in. I'm like, how's this look? They're like, wait, we just talked about this 10 minutes ago. I'm like, yeah, no, I had the robot do it. And then I'm like, yeah, I also probably just put myself out of a job. Or, you can put everybody else out of a job and triple my pay and I'll run the robot. Like, at some point the robot's not going to need running, but there is that it will need maintenance, but there's that creative piece that still goes in, at least with current AI, to like get it to respond correctly. And like AI does actually take a little bit of getting used to if you learn how to like work with it properly and ask the right questions and like improve upon previous answers correctly. You can actually create some really cool things, from like checking your calculus homework to like writing some code for something, writing copy for an email, for a flyer,
Writing some
designing
legislation, perhaps, or making.
So the new version, ChatGPT's ability to tap into the internet on Bing and actually look at Michigan health code, if you get really specific in your ask, it can do a damn good job. It just, I believe, I heard, I need to verify this, but I heard it passed the bar at 90%.
And that makes me think of a dun 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 thing. But yeah, I gotta get going on the decriminalization before there's AI law enforcement becomes so much of a thing. And that's a whole fucking file that we can't get into right now. But I did like there. I think the time is rapidly approaching where it's just like it's just going to be so hard to hide doing what it's just everything's just going to be known by anybody looking to find out. And so. Yeah,
but back to that idea of addiction. Now nobody's got anything to hide because you can't be secretive. That's going to create a trust amongst everybody. Like I hope, I think. I mean, it sounds a little dystopian, like there's no privacy, but at the same time, like there's no secrecy.
And I'm stoked for it'll take a while before it's at critical mass or everybody. But I do think that it seems like I'll see within my lifetime just a time where we're just kind of realizing collectively there's nothing that we have to do beyond survive. And then the next thing is, are all our people at least all right? And then there's nothing to do but self-actualize and be and just how much fucking fun and interesting, and fun is very different for different people,
Oh yeah.
For some people their joy is like the mystery, we're just like cracking the case sort of thing, figuring out the puzzle. That's not my thing so much. I like to like just express and I'm not so much into the I like a bit of problem solving, but at some point it's just like it's just gonna be we're gonna not, and then this will sound very very unapologetically utopian, but at some point it's like we will kind of inherit the earth and be like, oh, we have this this massive spherical playground. There's some things of to interface with the objectivity of nature. We don't want to fucking trash the place, but we can do a lot here. And I do think that we are like approaching within, I don't know, I think within a century, it seems like, just with how fast things have been going now, that that the extractive, rapacious qualities of the human species, like, we'll be dialing that back. But it's going to get really weird before it gets there. But I just see these things as inevitable, because at some point we're just going to be so efficient. And you just leveraging AI and robotics, we're going to be so efficient that it's like, all right, what's left to fucking do? I guess go to space, which of course we're going to fuck around and find out. We're going to fuck around and find out at everything. But
I went on a tweeting campaign to Elon Musk last year about how he needs to hire me as his chief astromycologist. It didn't go anywhere.
So that you can, what is there a word, mycoform Mars? Is that a thing?
Well, I mean terraform, but like,
but particularly
like
mushrooms.
Mushrooms are going to be a key piece of that. Fungus in general are going to be a key piece of that. It's not just mushrooms by any means. Like slime molds and like things like that are going to
slime Mars. You're gonna want to.
Yeah, I mean, like 1990s Nickelodeon.
Yeah, you're gonna collab with Nickelodeon. We need to slime Mars.
We're gonna turn it orange and then green.
Or we'll get to the point where our militaries and war is just all this joke thing. It's all Nerf and slime, and it's like, and it's constant.
Yeah,
and there's
I honestly think if we just cover it in green slime, it'll take.
Nerfing and a sliming
Yeah.
and a carrying on. All right, we'll have to
I'm really glad some nonsense actually happened. I was a little worried there.
what?
We were extraordinarily
serious?
sensical
Oh,
for
well,
a very long time.
We'll have a lot of opportunities to do this. And yeah, and the next one, and the next one, the rule is things like cows and goats taking mushrooms, ergotism. Yeah, silly. The contrast is an important thing in life. What would it be to be nonsensical if there wasn't at some point the
Man.
contrast of
One of the times I got beat up in jail was for saying Jesus was a mushroom, and like I'll prove it.
well, Santa Claus was a mushroom man, right?
And I would say in literally that same argument sense, Jesus was too. Like not a Arctic shaman, but I think if you like actually look back at the lore and like language, you're gonna actually find the teaching itself. The idea of Jesus as a teaching is less a man more than the teaching of the sacred mushroom. And I think you're gonna see in some like early frescoes of Jesus, like mushrooms dancing around. Like, but we'll
I've
get
heard
into
this theory.
it. Yeah,
I've heard this theory, but we can.
I can definitely dive into it. But ergotism and Solomon's like showbread and like the use of like deciding whether a woman was guilty of adultery or not. Yeah, the Bible's fucking wild, dude. I mean, if we want to talk about drugs in the Bible.
I remember my sister had this song at her in Bible school, and she would sing it at home. I was never there when this was like sung in a scholastic setting, but it was something like, "There are five constipated men in the Bible. Oh, the first constipated man was Cain. He wasn't Abel. So the second constipated man was Moses. He took 2 tablets, and the second, and there, shit, there. That's all I can remember. But it was constipated man in the Bible. Psychedelic drugs in the Bible, any fucking way. This has been fun, and
this is great.
And we'll have plenty of opportunities to do this.
Opportunities to do it again.
In fact, and Dan Safe will be at Nonsense Night March 21st.
Wait, is it 21st?
31st. Jeez.
Oh, Jesus.
I do
you
that
had me
so much.
scared.
I type it like that. I make mistakes like that all the time. You need to get me away from the levers of anything objective, because it's just not how I'm wired. But happy reality to all.
Happy reality.